All right, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine videocast and podcast. Today is January the 29th, 2017, and doing something a little bit different today. We're going to be interviewing each other. We've had a lot of questions about who we are and what we do when we're not podcasting. And since we don't have a guest this week, I thought we could do that. Be something kind of fun to do. So let's get short introductions out of the way first, and the two prizes we're going to give away. So why don't we start with Joe's end and work our way over on the short introductions. Joe?
Joe Hover, writer, editor.
All right, Kelly?
Kelly Young, executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
Bullshit.
Who said that? Who said that? You're on the list.
I don't know. You're going to have to hit the replay later on that. I think it was Matt Carpenter.
Yeah, for sure.
Your turn, Matt.
Matt Carpenter. I'm one of the executive readers of Strange Eons.
One of the few.
Pete.
Pete Rawlik, author, writer, and plague carrier.
Unclean. Pete has the flu. Okay, Rick.
Rick Lay, writer.
And Salome.
Salome Jones, editor and writer sometimes.
And I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraft eZine, chief cook and bottle washer, and executive editor.
And now standing ovation. Woo!
So prizes. Let's do prizes.
Okay.
What do you got?
2 prizes. Okay, first of all, this wonderful collection by Mike Griffin. I mean, yeah, we know him and we like him. We like his misses, but the stories are, on their own merit, excellent reads.
The Lure of Devouring Light is the book.
Yes, and then we do have that sequel to Red Equinox, Black January, that we still need to give away.
Yeah,
These
I
are
forgot
both
to give
good
that
books.
away last week. So we'll correct that this week. All right. Why don't we start? I think that Salome can't stay the entire time, so why don't we start with Salome?
Yay.
Who's got questions for Salome?
Well, I'm interested. You're living in London now, right?
Actually, right now I'm living in Spain. Before this, I was in London.
Okay, where are you from? What took you overseas? Why don't you kind of sketch out how you ended up where you are?
Well, I got a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing in the United States, and I loved going to school again so much that I decided I wanted to go to London and get another master's degree in writing because I'm a crazy person. And so I went there then, and that's where I met my husband. And then the reason that we're here now, the real reason, is because I had a student visa and then I had a work visa for 2 years, like a post-study work visa that was not renewable. And even though my husband and I were married, they would not let me have a new visa. And so we had to find someplace where we could both go. And so we came here. We're hoping not to stay here forever, but we're here for now.
Where in Spain?
It's a secret. I will tell you later. I don't know. I feel kind of weird about people knowing where I am.
Oh, well, sorry about that. But is it sunny and pleasant like we all think of as Spain, or is it dusty and full of like acorn-fed ham and that kind of stuff?
It is full of acorn-fed ham. Actually, I'm not a huge fan of pork, but that stuff is amazing. It is delicious. They call it secreto. What is it called? Secreto something. Secreto Iberico.
You know
Iberian
what?
secret.
We need to get Tim as a guest on the show one of these days.
Yeah, I'm sure Tim could be talked into coming on the show, couldn't
I'll
you?
bet he could be blackmailed into it. You're right.
He said, yeah. Blackmailed.
I want to know how you got into editing and writing horror and fantasy and all that you're doing.
Well, I've always been a fan of fantasy various weird things. I don't know why. I love weird things. And so that's what I was writing when I went to grad school. And what I learned is when you go to grad school, they don't want you to write that stuff. They don't think it's serious. I was told I was wasting my talent. And so I basically had to put up a fight for what I wanted to write. They wanted me to write literary fiction. They were like, oh, learn to write literary fiction first, then you will be allowed to write something else. And I'm like, I don't think so. So I wrote my graduate thesis all about books that were non-literary and like, here's what these things do that you could not do with literary fiction. And I got a top grade on it. So I've just always loved it. And I don't like realistic fiction because I have a realistic life.
Yeah.
That is
Exactly.
plenty. So after I graduated, I started editing other people's work. I was in a writing group and I just discovered that I had kind of a knack for editing. And other people would come to me and say, oh my God, yeah, your feedback was the best I'd ever had. And so I just let it develop. And then I met Tim, and he is an editor. And then he said to me, you're a really good editor, and that's not very common. Like, I've tried to hire good editors and couldn't find them when he was an executive editor at a medium-sized publisher. So I just, it is what I am good at. I don't know why.
That's very true, because you've edited a little bit of my stuff and you're working on a novella, which you've seen some of it. I'm going to get the rest of it to you actually later this week. And any writer out there listening to this, if you need someone to edit your novel, make it a lot better than it is, Salome can do that. Seriously.
And I love it.
I believe they can find the contact information for that service on your webpage, right? It goes.
I wanted to send Salome my new novel to edit, but I didn't think she had enough red pens.
I have plenty of red pens.
Can they contact you through Ghost?
Be careful, young lady.
I'm just kidding. You put it out there. Am I supposed to say, oh, no, Joe, no red pen would be needed? I suppose that's what I should have said. Sorry.
I like to see the scene where you're trying to talk Joe into one exclamation point.
I would never.
No. It's not like that. It's not like that. No.
Joe just uses exclamation points in real life to give it flavor.
That's on Facebook. There are what is there, 2 in all of my writing? I think there are only 2 examples of multiple exclamation points. And one is in Pete's fish story.
Salome, how can writers contact you if they are interested in
well, if they want editing, they should go to flourishediting.com. FLOURISH editing.com.
flourishediting.com. Okay.
Yeah, that's our editing company. This is my cat. He does not edit.
Why? Is he scared of red pens?
No, he isn't. Did you see he had a conversation with someone on Facebook?
Yes.
I posted it on my Facebook page.
Yeah, I saw that.
Nutball.
Salome, what are you working on right now?
Right now, well, actually, we just finished this anthology. It's a science fiction anthology, and there's a story in there from Warren Ellis, and one from Tricia Sullivan, and one from Jeff Noon, and one from Pete Rawlick.
You had me, and then you lost me.
Step outside your box, and everybody pisses all over you.
No, it's a good story. And that is going to come out in May. It's pre-orderable now. It's the most well-known writers that we've ever had in a book, and the most we've ever paid for stories. So it's a growth sign. It's actually quite good. There's some amazing stuff in there. Even just a couple of the stories would make it worth it.
As an editor,
Yeah,
If-
I edited it.
as an editor, if you didn't need to worry about, I don't know, permission or anything, you could edit a book on any theme or whatever that you want. What would be your fantasy thing to edit?
Well, my fantasy thing is really to do collaborative projects. So it would definitely be some mixture of realistic and non-realistic stories, but it would be like what is it called? Oh, the word escapes me, but they would all be interlinked somehow. So I love doing that. It is.
Are you
For
talking about a
me,
round robin type thing?
It's kind of like a round robin, except
shared
for
universe.
what?
Shared universe.
Shared universe. Yes, exactly. And as an editor, it's like editing as art, because I can make decisions about, if it's just a round robin, then the stories come right after each other. Like, isn't that what it is? It passes
Right.
from one author to the next and they all write in sequence. Well, the way I like to do it is not to have them come sequentially, but to give them all, like, here are the parameters that I want you to use, just a few parameters. Then as the stories start to build up, I just direct people a little bit more. Like, we need something that will follow this, make sure to include something about that. It's like directing a symphony of writers. And I love it so much. It's really a huge challenge to do, because you have to get people to agree to it, and they have to press their egos down. If I say, can you like change this here or there so that this person can write X? And some people are not very good at it, and I've had people get really mad at me, but in the end, it is this amazing thing.
I apologize for that over and over.
What?
I apologize for that over and over.
You should. No, it was not you. Anyway, that's my favorite thing. And it should be about something slightly dark, but slightly hopeful. Not too dark, otherwise I'll crawl into my closet and never come out. But I like some darkness, and I like some mysterious things that you can't figure out, and where then you go back and look at other things and go, oh my God, I was not expecting this.
Here's a question from the audience. Mike Pandolf. Mike, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. One of his questions was, and I'll repeat this to others, I'm sure. But Salome, what cliches in horror / weird fiction are you especially sick of? And if there's nothing, that's fine. We can. Is that a nothing?
Well, it's probably not a nothing. I see a lot of similar stories that come in, but to me, it's more in how it's done. So even a cliched thing can be okay if it's done well and with a tiny twist to it that you're not expecting. But nothing immediately pops to mind.
Okay. Guys, any more questions for Salome? No?
Where would you like to end up if you're not going to be staying in Spain? Where do you think you're going to end up?
I don't know. I really wanted to go back to London, but we have to see how the world turns out.
Will you be coming to Necronomicon?
When is it, in November?
August.
August. I don't know.
It's a lot of
I'm
fun.
most likely not to be able to, but we will see.
Well, as to how the world is turning out, here's an article here that will, I think, encapsulate 2017 so far. And the headline, this is in The Guardian, the headline is France's wild hamsters are being turned into crazed cannibals by a diet of corn.
Hamsters in the corn, yeah.
Actually, Mike thought about how the year is turning out is a quote from the life of Brian. I have a great friend in Rome named Biggus Dickus.
Did we lose Rick? I think we lost Rick.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, are you? Okay.
He was just having a nap.
Well, I think we'll go down the line and pick on Rick next.
Okay.
So, Rick, I guess I'll start off the questions and I will ask you, how did you get into, you write a lot of pulp fiction. You're into Lovecraft just like the rest of us, weird fiction. How did all this start for you? And then at what point did you decide, hey, I want to be a writer. I want to write this stuff?
Well, in the 70s, I was already in the 60s. I started to read a lot of pulp fiction, which included Lovecraft and Howard and Clark Ashton Smith, and things like Doc Savage and Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan.
Mm-hmm.
And in the mid 70s, 2 books came out written by a science fiction writer who I had not read before. One was called Tarzan Alive, and the other one was called Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life. And they were biographies of those pulp heroes. And I had read fictional biographies before. I had gotten into Sherlock Holmes at an early age, and there had been a book called Sherlock Holmes of Baker Street by William S. Baring Gould, which I had read. And in those biographies of fictional characters that Farmer did, he created this concept called the Wad Newton universe, where basically he took the old mythology that the Greeks used to have, where you had all these heroes who had super abilities because Zeus or somebody from Olympus was secretly their father, and did a science fiction version of it, where all these people in the 18th century, in 1795, this is an actual historical event, were in this village in England called Wad Newton, where a meteorite struck. And supposedly it radiates them and changes their genes, and as a result, all these people with fantastic strengths or intellects are born.
So wait, it
fictional
changes their
characters.
genes from Levi's to something else?
Genetic. In case it's no confusion. And it was this huge framework. And I started to, since I was reading pulp literature, I started to read a lot of pulp fanzines, like the Doc Savage Club Reader, and there was one called Echoes from the Pulps, and which had articles on all these pulp heroes. And I started to read Crypt of Cthulhu, of course, by Bob Price. But in the hero pulp fanzines, they started to do some articles that expanded on some of Farmer's theories. And I wanted to do that because I thought his series sort of concentrated on linking everybody genealogically, but wasn't looking at things that were happening in this. He wasn't linking events. And I saw it particularly in how a lot of writers handled criminals. There were similarities. You get a lot of people who are similar to Fu Manchu and Professor Moriarty and so forth. And I started to write a lot of articles that were published in the fanzines, linking fictional criminals and crime networks and so forth. And then I joined a news group, which was it was a Yahoo news group that was dedicated to the Wad Newton universe.
Oh, those were the days, Yahoo news groups.
I think that was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And probably late, it was probably around late 90s. And I got invited by John Mark L'Officier, who is the editor of Black Coat Press, who's into French literature. And I had gotten into French detective literature, mainly sort of by way of Sherlock Holmes' interest, because if you read like A Study in Scarlet, the first Sherlock Holmes story, there's a reference to some obscure French detective named Lecoq, who was very popular in the 19th century, but nobody knows who the heck he is now. So I said, yeah, I'll write some detective pastiches for you, John Mark. Where he had this anthology called Tales of the Shadowmen, which Peace also contributed to. Basically, you have to have French. You can have any character you want from American and English literature, but you have to have a major French character in the story. So a lot of people use Jules Verne and so forth. And that's how I started to write short stories. And he published a couple of collections of short stories by me, too.
What was your first published short story? Do you remember?
The Last Vendetta, which basically I can describe as a spaghetti western involving all the American criminals of literature. This weird murder plot in New Orleans. I used to work for a computer company, and they always sent me on a convention in New Orleans. So I had a convention of master criminals. And I also used to go to all these pulp conventions where we always have these auctions. So I said, what if all the master criminals of the 19th century, was set in 1900. So what if everybody active around 1900 got together at a convention where they auctioned off weapons and murder devices? And that was the first story.
Rick, I'm looking at the comments from the live audience, and you've got a lot of fans. Jack Cornelius is talking about the Wold Newton universe. And
No.
Another user, Jack, says, I'm reading now, I'm quoting, Rick is definitely my favorite out of the Legion of Doom. So knowledgeable.
I guess I'm guessing the Damien Dark of the group.
Yeah, that's about right. All right, who else has questions for Rick?
I have questions.
I do. Oh,
Go ahead, Joe, while I wrestle
Okay.
with my cat.
all right, Rick. You and I we're not as young as we used to be.
Yeah, we're the same age, in case anybody's interested.
Yeah.
Both born in 1955.
And we both started reading long ago. So writers of horror and weird fiction, when you were younger, who was your favorite? And has that changed? Do you have a different favorite these days?
Lovecraft. I first discovered him in 1970, I would say.
Okay.
In Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath.
Okay. And is he still top dog, or has it changed?
He's still top dog.
Okay. All right. You like to play with other things, be it the Phantom of the Opera or whatever. So, if you could use any character or created place, and permission isn't a problem in a work, what or who would you use?
I've done some disguised usages of this character,
But I
but I
mean,
would
this
like
is
to. I would like to openly use.
Out and out, if it was Batman, it could be Batman.
No,
You know,
I understand that. I want to openly use the Shadow.
Type that on the message.
Okay.
The pulp hero from Walter Gibson.
Yep.
Which was sort of the forerunner of Batman. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
He's to get an idea. If you haven't read those, if you saw the Darkman movies,
Oh yeah.
that's how the Shadow is. And it was even hinted that he was disfigured. And Will Murray recently wrote a couple of Shadow novels, and he did make him disfigured. But the original concept of the Shadow was supposed to be was a World War I spy who got shot down and his base got all burnt up, so he had to wear makeup and was living this subterranean existence.
All right.
Well, speaking of the Shadow, did you? I assume you've listened to at least some of the old time radio Shadow audio plays. What do you think of those in general compared to the rest of the Shadow literature?
I don't. I really don't enjoy them as.
I feel the same way.
Because, well, the just to give what the history of the Shadow was briefly, he started out as a narrator like the Crypt Keeper on radio. And then they hired a guy named Walter Gibson to write pulp novels about him and made him this detective who was running, which I've alluded to his origin before, but he's running around New York as a vigilante, shooting guys like mad. And there was none of this clouding men's minds, which is not a bad concept. But the radio plays are not as action-packed and a little predictable. There are there's like been one or two which I liked. There was one called, I think, The Temple Bells of Neba. It had Jeanette Nolan as a rival mystic, so it had two people clouding men's minds. But generally, I'm not into the mind clouding aspect of the Shadow. I like it more that he's running around with a machine gun and shooting guys like mad.
Mm.
Is my cat still
Salomon,
typing?
your turn.
Rick. Well, I've been wondering this about all of you really because I'm a latecomer to this group. And I'm interested in knowing how you met all these other clowns.
I got invited to they needed somebody who knew the Wad Newton universe.
Oh, that's right.
For a show because I'm blanking out on what the name of the gentleman was. It was an English.
It David? Was it David Burse?
Yeah, that sounds
I think
right.
it was David Burse. Yeah. Yeah, he's to blame for this.
he felt that Pete couldn't explain the Wad Newton universe.
Oh, ouch.
Mm-hmm.
Pete's not in the room right now, so.
I never saw the episode. It says we tried to discuss it, and Pete Rollick couldn't explain it well enough for everybody. So I suggested to Mike Davis that you be on the show. So that's how it started.
Yeah, that's been a while, hasn't it?
Right, but I was, there was a period where I kind of stopped reading Tarzan and Doc Savage, and I was concentrating solely on Lovecraft in the early 70s. I was buying Arkham houses and all this because this whole mythology of the Cthulhu mythos fascinated me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, speaking of that then, and that Lovecraft's still your boy, Do you have a favorite Lovecraftian beastie, and if so, why?
I'm trying to think if it's anybody other than Cthulhu. It's probably Cthulhu.
Okay.
Oh no, I'll take that back. It's Nyarlathotep.
Oh, now you're up.
Good answer.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's Nyarlathotep.
Good
He was the
answer, Rick.
first one I read in Quest of Unknown Kadath, and I loved him because he had different forms, and he has a personality.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other great old ones you can't humanize in any way, because then they lose their cosmic concepts.
So, anyone else have questions for Rick?
Yeah, just to make this a little personal. So,
Oh, it's personal.
why don't you tell us a little bit
This
about
time it's personal.
your family and what you do?
Yeah,
Well,
Rick Lay 2, the movie. This time it's personal.
Okay. Well, I'm retired now, but I used to be a computer programmer. I have a wife who's a mathematics professor, and I have 2 children. One is a lawyer working in the Nassau district for the Nassau district attorney, and my daughter is studying to be a doctor.
Wow.
Not too late to stop.
Matt's like, don't go down that road, right? What'd you? I guess my last question, back to The Shadow. What did you think of the movie with Alec Baldwin?
I liked it, but I thought it was flawed in that they began it the wrong way.
Mm.
Well, I have 2 problems. The first problem was, I think that rather than show his origin up front, that should have been a flashback. We should have gotten yourself interested in who this character was, and then you find out how he became what he was. But I did have a problem with his origin, in that essentially they turned him into a male version of Xena Warrior Princess, and that he's this former criminal he's trying to make amends for all the evil he did. And I said, running around laughing and shooting people is not good group therapy for that.
Mm.
Because, that's not his background, which is mysterious anyway in the pulps. He's not an ex-criminal. He's just more of a ruthless spy type of character.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for Rick before we move on?
I just
The
got
next victim.
one last question. Rick, your last Vendetta story sounds fascinating. Is there some place to read that? Or, do you remember what it was?
Sisters of the Shadows.
Sisters of the Shadows. I'm finding that.
The audience is writing that down too. That's the comment I get most from the audience is, we can't keep up with all the books that you list on the show, but we love it.
If you're into, I also wrote a spaghetti western story. There's a book that came out recently called, and this is, I pitched this concept to a publisher, and this is the second time this happened. They treat me like I'm some incredible cult writer, and they put my name in the title, which to me I'm extremely obscure. But there's an anthology that came out called Rick Lay's Major Sabbath, which is the sort of the origin of the Lee Van Cleef character in For a Few Dollars More. We couldn't use copyrighted names, but it's clear who I'm writing about if you've seen that movie.
Weren't there several books with your name in the title?
Yeah, there was Rick Lay's Secret Histories, which was a collection of my Wad Newton articles. I've had 3 books with my name in the title. spaghetti western anthology I just mentioned, and the 2 article collections. But that was the publisher's idea. I'd rather not have my name in the title.
I think you deserve it.
To us, you're famous.
I mean, it's not like I'm Stephen King here, you know.
You're the smartest one.
I'm not even Joe Pulver or Pete Rollick.
But you're the smartest one we got here.
And the nicest.
Well, that's
By far.
damn 2 and 2.
By very far. Yeah.
So
I mean, let's face it. You don't have that kind of, Jupiter-sized ego that Mike Davis has got, and you're not a drunk like Kelly Young.
Yeah, I got an ego.
Course, not even Pete Rollick's a drunk like Kelly Young. Well, every once in a while.
He's trying though.
If I'm on the boat.
It's good to have a goal.
So wait, so all of you Rick Lay fans, you groupies,
that's
you want
me.
to speak to the man. He will be at Necronomicon, we believe.
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask that.
And if anybody out there how they did the Ray Bradbury video,
Mm-hmm.
the Ray Bradbury video I'm talking about?
I think I do, yes.
The girl, the flashlight, reading Ray Bradbury stories.
Right.
So if any girls want to do, Rick Lace kind of videos like that, that's okay. And
of all the writers I know, he would probably be first in line for that kind of treatment.
And make sure you post these things at the Lovecraft eZine message board, because we want to see these and share them. They're important. So, we figure, another week or so, and then we'll start seeing these I want to fuck Rick Lay videos.
There it is. There's the word. There it is.
You're never going to see these kind of videos for Kelly Young because nobody wants to. Well, he's too drunk to get it up anyway. So you know what I'm saying?
What the hell?
Wow. It's got awfully personal.
Wow. Got awfully hard.
I thought Mike said he wanted personal stuff here, so I was
Did we not
not
warn
that
us so we could
personal.
bleep it out?
Yeah, blame Mike.
Yeah, this is a lot of work for me.
Everybody was accusing me of being the one who taints the purity of the Lovecraft eZine chat. So.
No, that's Kelly. That's Kelly. We all know that. All right. Well, Rick, I cannot tell you how glad I am that David Burst did introduce you to me and that you're on the show. You, all kidding aside, you really are one of the nicest guys I know, and I'm very proud to say that I'm a friend of yours and that I know you.
I'm
Absolutely. Here.
Let's move on to.
I, on
Sorry?
the other hand, Rick, am terrified of you because I've roomed with you.
Let's move on to Pete Rollick.
Yay.
I want to read something, if I can scroll up in the live chat here.
Oh no.
Yes, here it is. Brandon Young says, I don't know if I should read this.
Yes,
We studied Pete Rollick's Reanimators in Lovecraft class. That was cool.
What? What class was this?
I want to keep going here. And I wrote, what class? And Brandon goes, Amy Sturgis at Mythgard Institute. You know Amy Sturgis.
Yes, I know Amy Sturgis. She's a big fan of my work.
Yeah, so
yes,
she, not only that, but let's see, they studied The King in Yellow and, quote, you guys were part of the syllabus. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, the Lovecraft eZine was one of the top resources for HP. Hewlett-Packard, I don't know what he's talking about there. And I turned on immediately, loved it, loved the group dynamics. Matthew Carpenter sent me a double CD of Fungi from Yuggoth. So thanks for all that information and for boosting Pete's ego even more, Brandon. Appreciate that.
Well, it's funny because people either love Reanimators or they hate it.
Can you love the work but not the author? Just asking for a friend.
What was the question?
Can you love the work but not the author?
Yeah,
I'm just asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah. Sure, you can love the author, but hate the work too.
Okay, just clarify.
Yeah, it's
All
just
right.
like watching O.J. Simpson anymore. You can still appreciate what a player he was and not care much for the guy.
You can still like the Towering Inferno. It's okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, who's got questions for Rick? And let's please not beat the dead horse of the stolen car thing again.
All right.
So
Rick never stole a car.
okay, I have a question for Pete.
That
Yeah.
we know of.
We know that you are actually in the real world a scientist, you know, who does hardcore scientific research regarding the Florida Everglades and water quality and things like that. And we know that you have a history of being a rare book collector and dealer. Dealer of rare books, not dealer.
He's a dealer. Yeah.
Whatever will make a buck.
When did you first get the bug to actually put words on paper?
I can remember writing a story when I was about 12 years old, in which all it is this guy walking down the street, and the city goes from being a city to a slum to a redevelopment area, and he goes into a condemned house, and he sits down at a table, and there's all these demons sitting there, and he calls a meeting to order. And that was the whole story. I showed this to my mother, and she freaked out because I spelled condemned condom.
But she was not concerned about the demons.
No.
No, wait. That's an interesting story considering Reanimatrix. You have a condomed house.
Yeah.
Like maybe it was foreshadowing.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
So, yeah.
foreplay.
So that was like when I was a kid. Somewhere when I was around 16, I read Skullface, and I have a massive handwritten novella that's a sequel to Skullface that I will probably never publish because it's very juvenilia, and it's really bad. But all through college, I sort of wrote bad poetry. You know, I wrote bad vampire poetry. And this was the age of Vampire the Masquerade and things like that. I wrote some Larry Niven pastiche, which he was the guy I wanted to imitate. But the guy I collected was Lovecraft. I've been collecting Lovecraft since I was like 6 years old. So yeah.
6? That's pretty early.
Yeah, well, my dad had this book. It's like a modern library edition of Tales of Horror and the Supernatural. And it has 2 stories in it by Lovecraft, the Dunwich Horror and the Rats in the Wall. And he used to read me Rats in the Wall as a bedtime story. So, yeah.
Some colorful language in there for a 6-year-old.
Yes.
I think I understand a lot.
Yeah, it makes sense now.
So Reanimators is actually not your favorite Lovecraft story, is it?
No, I think
Well,
when
what
it
is it?
comes to a tight, condensed, really good story from Beyond is essentially one of Lovecraft's best. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I do. It's to me, it's an interesting idea. So,
Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Sure.
Well, first off, Pete loves other creations.
Yep.
So, if you could, you don't have to worry about permission. You can use anybody or anything. What would you use? That's my first question.
wow. Okay. So if I had the skill set yet, which I don't think I have, I would write a Nero Wolfe novel.
Cool.
In fact, this past week, I took a day off and I drove up to Vero, which is about an hour and a half, and I met John Lescrow, who has written a Nero Wolfe pastiche. Son of Holt, and Rasputin's Revenge. And I got my copies signed. And we had a nice long conversation about Nero Wolfe and the Nero Wolfe cookbook and, you know, making those recipes. So he's a big Holmesian and Nero Wolfe fan. If I were to do anything that I could do, and I think I have the skill set for right now, it would be this.
Dr. Fox.
I would do Dr. Phibes. He's just over the top. He's an amazing character. He is deliciously revengeful and evil. But everything he does makes perfect sense in his twisted little mind.
Tell me about it.
Yeah,
I got stories I could tell you about that.
I know, and we've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Would you?
My next question is, you read a ton, you've read a ton, you've been reading forever. So, like what I asked Rick, did you have an early favorite writer, and is it different nowadays? You know.
So, you know, we would go to outside Philadelphia. There was this place called the Book Swap, and you know, you would take books and you would trade 2 for 1, and I would scour the shelves for Lovecraftian literature. And you know, I found my first copies of the Dahl paperback Weird Tales there, all these kinds of things. And you know, I picked up a lot of Lovecraft and a lot of Derleth. And you know, I'm young and I don't understand everything yet, but you know, Lovecraft is sexy, Cthulhu is sexy. And I'm liking this stuff, but what I really turned me on was Graham Masterton. You know, I would see my mother reading Graham Masterton books, and they were all romances or giant novels of adventure or suspense. And the same author was in the horror section. So I read The Manitou, Revenge of the Manitou. And I still have, I think he did a really good job of updating Lovecraftian fiction for the 70s. He brought it back into the mainstream a little bit, and he kind of hit it. Not everybody could figure it out. And there's a halfway decent movie with, Tony Curtis?
Yeah. Had you read Lurker at the Threshold before Manitou?
Yeah, I had.
So
and,
you caught what was going on?
Yeah, so you could see where Masterton was linking to Derleth and Lovecraft through his stories. And then I got a copy of Wells of Hell, which is a Lovecraftian novel with no Lovecraftian ties.
It has Cthulhu and Rayleigh,
right,
in a different context.
Yes. So yeah, so Masterton when I was a kid. Now, I hate to be, you know, a kiss ass, but Ramsey Campbell.
Okay.
How can you not like Ramsey Campbell's work? He has this incredible ability to take the mundane, normal everyday horror, you know, normal everyday events, and transform them into horror. Really good stuff. And I had the first book of The Blind Dead or something like that. What's the new one? The Dayalock trilogy.
The Searching Dead.
The Searching Dead. I have that on my staff.
I want to read that one. I really want to read that book.
Yeah,
that's going to be part of a trilogy,
right? But like Kelly, you know, I have 50 books to read, and in the last week I've read 10, mostly by cheating. So, yeah.
What's cheating you?
If I've read a story already, I'm skipping it. So I have lots of anthologies or collections, and I'm like, okay, I've read this one, I'm going to skip it. So I don't have to waste the time rereading that.
I have a question from the audience for you. How
Yes.
often do people in your real life appear in your books and stories?
Ooh, a lot. A lot. Mike Davis is in several books.
I am?
Yes. Joe Pulver is in several.
Mike, haven't you read them? Oh
No, he hasn't.
Oh, sorry.
What books do you have Mike in?
Mrs. Davis runs some.
Oh,
yeah.
I remember that now.
I know about that one. That's right.
Yeah, you're talking about in Reanimators, I think.
Yep, and then Joe Pulver is in a book because I played off the idea that pulverize, sand, dust, that kind of thing.
You let out Joe's secret identity.
Yes. I think a few other people. Alex Kreitner's in the book. In fact, Alex Kreitner will be, well, the Kreitners will be in the book I'm working on right now. He was in Reanimatrix. They were in Reanimatrix.
I didn't realize you know Alex that well.
What's that?
I didn't realize that you knew Alex that well.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, he helps a lot with Lovecraft eZine and answers emails and stuff like that for me. Keeps me sane, basically.
There are people in my work, we do this. We find people that, you pissed me off, I'm going to kill you. So, there are people that have gotten shuffled back together, and they get hacked to pieces someplace.
I've got a short story that's eventually going to come out in which you're a police inspector.
Yeah, I actually have been Tuckerized quite a bit. I'm in a Voyager novel. I'm the villain in a Voyager novel. I was in a story by Adam Troy Castro that appeared in fantasy and science fiction. All these kinds of things. So, yeah, I'm returning the favor.
Necronomicon question. You are going to Necronomicon in August, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
I believe that's the 17th through the 20th. Do I have that right, guys?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. In Providence.
That's also the same weekend as college move-in for my son.
That's right.
So.
Rick, I might have that same issue. Ethan's going to be going away for his first year of school. I might just have to put him on a bus and say good luck.
Yep.
Give him money for movers. Isn't that what dads are for, to give the kid money? That's what I heard anyway.
Hey, you got a strong back.
You're young.
All right. Next question.
Yes. What other questions do we have for Pete, guys?
I have some questions.
All right.
I know, Pete, that you have had some kind of, well, I'm going to say supernatural experiences in your life.
Yes.
And I'm interested in knowing whether you think your interest in supernatural books influenced you in the direction of having supernatural experiences, or was it the other way around? Or they
actually, honestly, I think that the two are completely separate. In most cases, for example, my grandmother used to work at the General Lafayette Inn in Pennsylvania, which was rumored to be one of the most haunted places in Pennsylvania. And one day she was telling the stories that she had heard, and we were in her house, and as she was telling these stories, the mirror just falls right off the wall, slides down the wall, it doesn't shatter. And, so is it a giant coincidence? Probably. But it was kind of weird at the time. I've had an experience where I was supposed to meet a whole bunch of people at a particular place. They went one way, I went the other.
Yeah, this is a creepy story. I love this story. You've told us before.
I'm doing a shortened version, but so I get to the place and they're looking at me like, "How'd you get here?" And I was like, "What? I came across the bridge." And they said, "The bridge is out." And I was like, "No, it's not. I crossed the bridge." And I walk back, and the bridge has been pulled out. It's a wooden bridge. They're doing construction on it, and there's just no way to walk across the bridge. My shoes are completely dry. There's no mud, nothing. So weirdness.
How old were you when that happened?
Probably 22.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, but there was lots of inebriation and other stuff going on. So
You just talk about your latest book just real briefly, and then what's next for you?
which book is that?
Reanimatrix.
Reanimatrix.
Oh, so Reanimatrix is this idea that I played with in the pages of the eZine, where I wanted to talk about the next generation of Lovecraftian heroes. So this is a story of Robert Peasley and Megan Halsey, who are the children of Lovecraftian characters, who are doing their own investigations of Lovecraftian horrors. And Robert becomes a detective in Arkham, and he picks up a case, and it's the murder of Megan Halsey. Her body is pulled from the river, and she's dead. And it's an homage to the book and movie Laura, in which he moves into her house and doing research on her life, and slowly falls in love with the idea of her memory.
Mm-hmm.
But this is Arkham, and things are never what they seem. So,
and then
it's one of my it's got some racy bits to it. So, yeah. Megan is a very forward female character. Robert is very repressed. And they have some interesting exchanges. So,
and lessons were learned along the way.
Yes.
There's a prequel.
Yes, there is.
Called The Resignation of Abraham Pierce.
Right.
Which you can get from Arkham Bazaar, and I recommend this highly. Besides Pete's excellent story, it's got one of the best covers I've ever seen. It's like a flashback to the old 1970 Lovecraft covers.
Yeah, and it's a flip book, right?
Yes, it is. On the back is Challenge from Beyond. The latest version of Challenge from Beyond, because the Lovecraft Film Festival does round robins using the original title from Lovecraft's Round Robin.
That is so cool. All right, we got to move on, but we got a question from the audience, and then Matt has a question. Question from the audience is from Jack Cornelius. Did Pete put that in a story? And I believe he's referring to the bridge story.
No, I've never written about that.
It's creepy. You should.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to. I have there's a couple stories. Well, there's one in particular that I've written that I've been paid for, and I don't think it will ever appear. And I don't really write that much about Florida and what I do down here, but I did write one environmental story, and it's really based on my own experiences, but I think it's in development hell. So,
Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, what is since you've been doing this for a while now, and your craft keeps getting better and better, what is the work that you're most proud of currently? Looking back on what you've written.
Well, I think Weird Company is really good. I really like the Weird Company. Reanimatrix is a completely different kind of story. Weird Company allowed me. It was the first book I was trying to write, it was the one I did the most research on. It was the one I was most bound by because I was trying desperately to work in an existing timeline, and there were fundamental problems with that timeline that I had to, which I thanked, Joe and Willem and Bob Price and a whole bunch of other writers. They wrote me into corners. But yeah, the Weird Company I like because it bridges the gap between two of my favorite stories, Who Goes There and At the Mountains of Madness. And it fills that hole, and it kind of explains away some of the things that you see in the At the Mountains of Madness and how they lead up to the Weird Company. Who Goes There?
Okay.
So okay.
Great. So let's move on to Matt Carpenter.
Yeah.
Who wants to grill Matt Carpenter, because this may be your only chance.
Nobody has any questions? Thanks. Well, the next person.
Put this guy under the
So
microscope.
Matt, why haven't you accepted my story yet, you bastard? No.
Well, there's a reason. It's like, what I find interesting is I'm roughly the same age as Robert Price. I might even be his age. And when he discovered Lovecraft, immediately he started corresponding with everyone that he could and created a fanzine. And my response was, this is really cool. I'm going to read all of this. I've got another focus of where my talents are going, such as they are. And I've worked myself now into a position where I've achieved a reputation in my community for being good at what I do. And as time has gone on here, I've gotten more and more and more swamped. So I now have less time than ever before. It's just really pretty amazing. I used to have some time at work, like an hour a day, when I could just sit and kind of go through emails and read, and it's not happening right now. It's on my, besides the number of submissions is such that I was kind of waiting to hit a critical mass and then go through them.
Well, we've stopped submissions at Lovecraft eZine for the next few months, so we're not going to get any more in unless they're books, and that, in which case I'd like to see them too.
Sure.
So for those who do not know in the audience, Matt's a doctor, so assume that's the work you're referring to.
He's got his PhD in funk.
Dr. Funk.
I've got some questions for Matt.
All right.
Sure.
How did you discover Lovecraft?
It's interesting. You talked about you fell in love with the pulps. I tell you, sometimes I feel like I'm the most naive, credulous person in the world. I've always been reading fantastical fiction. I started off with, like, say, The Wizard of Oz, and my older brother got a set of the first 6 Oz books. Who knew there's more than one? L. Frank Baum wrote 14 of them, most of them illustrated by John R. Neal. And I read most of those, and then, oh, what do you know? There's more than one Dr. Dolittle book, and I read all of those, and and it just kept going. And then I don't know if if this story keeps repeating in my life. My older brother James brought home a Doc Savage book, and I picked up this Doc Savage book and I read it, and I really liked it. And I thought, wow, this Kenneth Robeson, he's a great writer, and he keeps putting out new books. And whenever I did any money, I'd run down to the corner drugstore. That's when they had a book thing. And I think, has Kenneth Robeson written a new book? And I picked up like 60 or 70 Doc Savage books. You know, this is in the early 70s when they were printing them.
Yeah.
Remember those? And I thought they were all new. And I thought they were all really written by a guy named Kenneth Robeson. When I found out he was a pseudonym and these were books that were reprinted that were like 50 years old at the time, I was like crushed. Okay, well, the same thing then what happened next was Edgar Rice Burroughs. And it wasn't just Tarzan. I read all the John Carter books. I read Carson of Venus. You know, anything that Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote. I think I read like 30 or 40 Tarzan books. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I did the same.
Okay, eventually, we had moved from Columbus to Cincinnati, and I think I was 13 at the time. The Ballantine adult fantasy series starts coming out. And my older brother, who bought all of these books, brought home one of those Lancer books. And it was like I think The Call of Cthulhu was the first Lovecraft story I read when I was about 13 or 14. And that has a very different tenor than the other pulp and science fiction kind of heroic, the good guy wins, there is right in the world that needs to be fought for. This was very different. I remember reading the Clark Ashton Smith story, The Seven Guises.
Yes.
And it was so striking to me. First of all, the prose was so incredibly beautiful. The monsters are so grotesque and strange. And nothing ended happily for the guy.
Yeah.
You know, he never made it out alive. It's like, that was so different than what I had been reading. And I sometimes think that what you read when you're 12, 13, 14, it imprints on you.
Yeah.
And it was Lovecraft, and that's kind of when I discovered Conan, Robert E. Howard stuff. But it was like reading Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu. I think I reread that story like 10 times in a week. It was just so striking to me, and ever since I was hooked. You know, I bought I don't know how many different Lovecraft collections without bothering to look at the contents. Realized I kept buying the same stories over and over again. It's like, oh, this looks good. Okay, this is new. And about then, let's see, this was into the late 70s. I never knew of the Crypt of Cthulhu because it never occurred to me that there would be a community of like-minded people. In fact, that never occurred to me till the internet really hit, and I discovered the Usenet on Google. That's when I first realized, you know what? There are people out there who like this stuff as much as I do, who are better informed than me, who know a lot of stuff that I'm missing out on. And,
Talking about alt.cthulhu, aren't you?
Yeah, that was, gosh, I think 2001, 2002, 2003 is about when I discovered that.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to realize there's a larger community out there. There's Lovecraftian scholarship, and there's books beyond the occasional Chaosium anthology.
And alt.cthulhu, that used to be the place before Facebook, before, you know, before the internet even really hit. That was the place to go.
I even missed out on
so
most of
busy
that,
now.
to be honest.
Sorry?
It was actually fading as a force by the time I got into it. And a lot of the people who were like big names in the field had moved on to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
But it was basically an evolution from things like The Wizard of Oz to pulp fiction books, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and then I discovered the adult fantasy series and Lovecraft through that.
I know you have an opinion on this, and I think you're one of the best people to ask because over the years, you've written so many wonderful reviews of Lovecraftian books and stories, and there really is an art to a great review. I'm terrible at it, so I admire people who can do it. What do you see as the state of mythos fiction and Lovecraftian fiction, cosmic horror going forward? How do you see it?
I am a bit at a loss because on the one hand, it's worse than ever before because anybody can, without an editor, put out an e-publication, get a writing group to promote their book on Amazon and then hawk it relentlessly.
Right.
Or sell it through Create Space. And it's very easy to pick up a bunch of detritus. It's inevitable that's going to happen. And furthermore, another thing Amazon has done is they basically squeezed me out for what I'm willing to do. They only really now will promulgate reviews that were, quote, verified purchases. So if you buy your book direct from the company and not from Amazon, you can't necessarily review it. And I used to create these things that were called my lists of like.
Yeah, I remember those.
I had a ton of those, and they've all been archived to the point where only I can see them. So Amazon squeezed out critique. And I've never really moved over to anything else like library thing. It's very easy to get swept up and try and read all this stuff and realize, hey, most of this is just not very good. I'm going to move on. Okay, that's the one hand. But on the other hand, it's greater than it's ever been because it's a paying market. The number of really talented writers in the field has never been greater. I mean, we'd speak nostalgically of these mythos stories of the 70s and whatever, and you go back and you read them, and most of them are crap. You know, they're the kind of stuff that would now be EPUBs. You know, like if you pick out a lot of those old Chaosium anthologies, Robert Price picked those stories for a reason, but a lot of them really suck. And so like you pick up like an old, like, I don't know, Cthulhu's Heirs, but over half the stories are dross, you know, and only a few of them are really good. And this is what I used to anticipate when I pick up a book. And now there are amazing, truly amazing anthologies being published by people who are better artists than ever before. Okay, but then on the other hand, it's kind of now passé. So that weird fiction never was just Lovecraft.
Right.
There always have been many different, it's kind of like fantasy always wasn't just Tolkien-esque. You know, if you read some of those old stories that Lynn Carter edited. So a lot of people now are kind of going off on non-Lovecraftian tangents. And then where you categorize this in terms of weird fiction, horror fiction, well, how much do you want to parse it? Okay. So I think the other thing I worry about is how much can the market bear? You know, there's only so many of us with only so much money, and so many books are being put out. It's like eventually there's going to be a saturation point where sales are going to drop. I think, maybe I'm wrong, sales are going to drop, and the interest in these more highly qualified writers is going to move on to something else, I think. But, you know, like Laird Barron, if you read his latest collection, there's supernatural elements, but it's not really, you couldn't say that this is any kind of Lovecraftian anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is Griffin's stories collection really Lovecraftian, or is it just kind of strange? The Glittering World. You know, we all like that book, but was that Lovecraftian? No, it was just weird. So I kind of think that Lovecraft is going to slip back somewhat into being a niche, where there's a lot of really crummy fan fiction, but if you can dig through that, there's going to be absolute gold that you can dig up.
Okay.
So that makes sense.
It does. Who else has questions for Matt?
That's what I thought.
I would like to know what kind of doctor you are.
Okay. I started off when I graduated from medical school in 1987. I went into internal medicine. And from internal medicine, because they were at the time, they were the intellectual Ghostbusters of the medical profession. And then I went into rheumatology. So I was a rheumatologist for about 10 years. But I was in the Air Force because they paid for medical school. And if you're in the Air Force long enough, you get enough experience, you get regarded enough, you get promoted into positions of administration. And the last 5 years I was in internal medicine, I was the program director for an internal medicine residency in charge of like 30 residents. And I had essentially no time for clinical practice. And about that time, my wife got pregnant with our first child, and the chief of medicine had moved on, and I was the most senior internist in the hospital. So the next logical progression, if I want to be promoted, is to take the position of chief of medicine, where there's absolutely no time to be in the clinic. I'd be in charge of like 400 odd people and administrative tasks. So I had an opportunity at that point to sidestep completely, and I leaped at it because it was the last chance I'd have in the Air Force. So it's the last chance I'd have ever, and I retrained into radiation oncology. So that's what I do now.
My last question for you, Matt, is you've edited a couple of Lovecraftian books, correct? Can you talk about those?
Oh yeah, this is for me, you know, I don't have any professional training in writing. I just read a lot of this stuff, and I'm opinionated about it. This is not really the same thing you need to be a qualified editor. It's like Salome is a real editor, and I'm not. But because perhaps of the exposure I've gotten on the eZine, because of all the reviews I used to write and don't really do anymore, I was allowed to edit a book for Ulthar Press. And that was a really fun experience. It was a challenge because we got something like 130, 140 submissions. We had to pick like 15 stories. And it was just very nice to say, okay, I'm not going to make any pretense about how important this work is, but in my own little way, I'm a member of the Lovecraft Circle is the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have one published story. It is in a chapbook for Rainfall Books. It still makes me laugh like an idiot because it's a huge, terrible pun. And I don't even know if anyone ever got it. I don't even know if anyone's ever read the story. But it's essentially like you read through it and you go, hey, that's a fucking Shaggy Dog story. What the hell?
What chapbook was that, Matt?
I forget it. The name of the story was Out of Time. And I just finished it. I was going, ha, 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 everyone will love this. I haven't got any fan mail yet.
Okay, so the first book you edited was A Lonely and Curious Country. What's the one that you're in the middle of your second one right now? Do I have that right?
The one that Pete was needling me about, justifiably. It is called Pickman's Gallery. And
Okay.
what we're looking for are stories about Pickman or his successors, his family, influences, vaguely related. And we're hoping to have it out by Necronomicon. But
Are you still looking for stories for that?
Yeah, we have not had nearly the response that we had for A Lonely and Curious Country, and I'm not sure why.
Okay, where can writers send a story?
I was about to, you can send it to Cthulhu Story Subs at AOL.com.
Cthulhu Story Subs
Yeah, it's like
at AOL. Okay.
Yeah, it's like I'm about to like send a plaintive begging. Do you watch Star Trek? Okay, Ferengi rule of acquisition number 109: dignity and an empty sack is worth the sack. So I'm about to like send a like a distressed letter to any writer I know. Hey, you won't get paid, but the exposure.
Yeah, I'll try to remember to promote that.
Hey, Matthew, could it be that people see that AOL email and think submissions ended back in 2002?
Yeah.
Okay, all I can say is when we first got on the internet, it was 1994.
You've got mail.
Yeah, okay, and AOL was the place to be. So we got this AOL account, and I never got rid of it. We have the same email, basic email, my wife and I, that we've had since 1994, and I have geological digs worth of kinds of spam that come in. Ancient spam, as well as the new stuff. You know?
But you need to switch to Gmail because Gmail takes good care of that spam. You don't see it.
Well, yeah, but then I'd have to change my email. So I just attach the Cthulhu story sub to that email.
Well, you can't
I'm
teach
not
an
saying
old dog
it's
new
sensible.
tricks. So.
I'm not saying it makes any sense.
All right. Shall we move on to Kelly Young?
Can we please not?
Yeah.
Yes, let's. Kelly,
So I
has
have
a
a
lot of
question. Kelly, who
things
does your
to tell
hair?
us.
I do my own hair. I put it on every morning.
Oh, good. It's a wig. Okay. Gotcha.
That explains a lot.
You're a screenwriter, right?
Part-time, yeah.
What are you working on right now, and what have you done in the past?
It's interesting you bring that up. Right now, Eric Morgret, who I've worked with on a number of short films before, he and I have decided to look at everything we have available to us as far as actors, sets, effects people, equipment, and we were going to try something new and just write a story around what we had available to us and go for a micro budget feature. And that is what we are doing next. It is a werewolf story.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then in the past, I've done a lot of short films. With Eric Morgret, I did The Package and The Shunned House.
Yeah, two Lovecraftian short films right there.
Yeah, and then I did something called The Small Stuff that was directed by Andrea Capere and won a couple of awards. And I tinker in a lot of stuff.
Are you going to be at Necronomicon?
It is unlikely that I'll be there. And if I do go there, it'll be purely as a fan and not in any kind of professional way.
The H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival is in October in
Yes.
Portland this year, right? Or you'll be at that, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we're always there because I live in Seattle, and so it's a drivable distance, and
Yeah.
they're very good to us there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're great people. Brian and Gwen.
Yeah.
All right, who's got questions for Kelly?
So if you don't make your living as a filmmaker, and I know you're rolling in it from the returns from Strange Eons.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
So what do you do during the day?
During the day, I am a manager for a landscaping company, actually. So I drive around and look at all the stuff that our workers do and make sure that it looks good.
This is why he listens to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Actually, that's why you're on the show, if you remember.
Really?
Just
he
because
was
I listen to podcasts?
No, you were listening to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. I mean, we knew each other. This has been only, a year ago.
Right.
And you were telling me how much you enjoyed it. And finally, I got sick of all the praise and decided that you needed to come on the show, too.
Yeah, I had
That's the way
downloaded
I remember it, at any rate. I don't know.
I had downloaded about 14 hours worth of podcasts, and I was burning through like 5 episodes a day. And you finally said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Strange Eons, for those listening who do not know what, and I've got a question from the audience too, who do not know what Strange Eons is, can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah, it is a print magazine that is supposed to kind of bring to mind the old magazines of the 70s, like Heavy Metal or Epic magazine. So there's comics, there's fiction, articles, interviews, things like that. And you can get those at strange-eons.com.
That's AEONS.
Yes.
Or just Google Strange Eons magazine. I suppose it would work too.
Right. If you Yeah, I think if you Google Strange Eons, we pop right up at the top.
Yeah. It really is, all kidding aside, a quality magazine. You guys do a great job with it.
Thank you. That's the one thing. I'm pretty proud of the way it looks. Rick Tillman is a InDesign and Photoshop expert. And so prior to that, I had done Planet Lovecraft, and I'd put all those together with my limited Photoshop skills. And when I quit that, he came on and basically made the magazine look amazing.
How long
So-
have you been doing it?
Strange Eons, we started in 2010. And Planet Lovecraft, I had started in 2007.
Wow, Strange Guns has been going 7 years. That's awesome, man.
It's crazy, yeah.
An audience member wants to know if you remember some of the craziest or weirdest submissions that you've received
Oh man,
for Strange Eons.
can I name names?
Well,
Mike, you know, because sometimes I will contact you and say, "Have you
Yeah.
heard of this cat?"
yeah. To tell a couple of good stories without names. Let's go that route.
Well, we did get our fiction submissions are handled by Justin Steele, who is our fiction editor, and on the Strange Eons Facebook page, I will sometimes get people who ask if they or how they go about submitting to the magazine, which is I just point them towards the website, which tells you exactly how to do that. And we are invitation only. And so this person had asked, how do they get an invitation? And I said, if you can point us towards any of your work online or in print, and I'll have Justin check it out. And if he likes what he sees, he can send you an invitation. But please do not send me a attachment on an email, because I don't want your viruses. I don't want anything like that. And the guy was kind of snooty, but was looking forward to sending us stuff. And so he also asked if we accepted poetry, and I said, we do not print poetry. So he sent an email to Justin, attached 2 pieces of fiction and several pieces of poetry. and Justin, who had seen the interaction we had already, basically turned him down without looking at it, and told him, if you can't follow the rules that the editor has just told you, then I'm going to just turn this down based on that right there. And this guy, I can't remember exactly what he called Justin, but an arrogant sod is what he called him.
Exactly not what Justin Steele is.
But we got a good laugh over that. And then that was, I don't know what that was, 6 or 8 months ago. 2 months ago, I got on the Facebook page an inquiry on how to go about submitting to the magazine from the same guy again. So that's probably my favorite story. We also get a lot of artwork that's hentai or tentacle porn or stuff like that, and I have to explain that that's not really what we're about.
Yeah.
So those are probably the extremes of the weird submissions we get, and since all I do, I actually search out the comics, and Justin gets the submissions or sends out invitations for submissions, and so we don't get a lot of crazy submissions, that kind of stuff. I'm sure Mike, you and Matt have to deal with that a lot more often than I do.
Yeah, there's been some crazy ones over the years. Who else has questions for Kelly? I don't want to hog the forum here.
I want to
Nobody?
know. I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, I had to make sure my mic was on. I thought I'd be talking here like.
They're ignoring me.
What is wrong? I want to know some interesting stories from your past. I don't know why. Perhaps you have like a sparkle in your eye. I imagine that you have done some wild things in your youth.
Kelly?
Well, I guess what a lot of people don't know is I used to play Sinatra in a Sinatra cover band.
I did
Oh my
not know
God.
that.
Yeah,
Does that mean you're a singer?
Does not surprise me at all.
Yeah, so I sang with a casino lounge act with two other women, and we would do a hour and 40-minute show a couple of nights a week. So
that seems about right. That sounds about right.
That might be where the peacock in me comes from. You'll notice that I wear a lot of flashy jackets and stuff like that.
I think Salome's got this idea that you have some kind of mysterious secret past.
I don't think it's any secret or any mystery. I have had a
It
I have
is
had
a mystery secret pass, except for the mystery part and the secret part.
I have had a fun life. I mean, I moved down to Los Angeles when I was 17, right out of high school, and went to work for a Playboy photographer. And I learned how to write screenplays down there from a guy named Dick Morgan, who used to write for Land of the Lost and a couple other shows back in the 70s. Because I had brought down a novel that was very, very bad and let him read it. And he was like, I think what you should be doing is writing screenplays. And so he handed me his stuff, and it was kind of like a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. So, and that was very tough to get into down there because every waiter in every restaurant has a screenplay. And so I moved back up to Washington State and decided to try and put together a small company here. And that's when I met Eric Morgret. We did a couple of music videos together. He did a music video for Alice in Chains, and then we met on the set of my brother's band when they were doing their music video, and we just hit it off very well and decided to form a little production company, and that's what we've been doing since.
You let me read a screenplay recently. I don't know how much you want me to say about it, but is that going to happen at some point in the future? I really liked it.
Thank you. I don't know if it is or not. It was optioned and picked up by a small production company up here, and then the money has kind of fallen through. So they still really, really want to do it, but it doesn't seem to me like there's any movement on it right now.
Can
actually
you talk about what it is, or no? We'd rather not.
Yeah, it was called Widowed, and it was about a minister who had lost his faith, and his wife is slowly turning into a giant spider. So, and I
hate when that happens.
I had actually let Philip Fracassi read it, and he sent back some excellent notes because I had told him that I didn't think this was going to happen up here, and he sent back some notes and told me to send it down to Hollywood and see if I could get something going on that.
It tends to cause marriage problems.
Yeah, actually, I mean, well, you read the script. It actually brings them closer together.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The things you'll do for love.
All right. Anybody else have questions for Kelly? All right. So we'll move on to our next victim.
Wait. So,
yeah.
Where do you see, like, one of the things I kind of liked about Strange Eons is the comics, but you are kind of moving away from that now, right?
We are. It's tough to get. It's tough to get the comics, and we're such a low-paying venue that I feel bad. We'll get these people send us these amazing pieces, and I then remind them, you do know what we pay for this stuff, right? And they're like, yeah, we get it, but nobody else will even bother looking at this stuff. So I don't know exactly what to do, and it's nice to hear that you like the comics, because I don't know if that's the general consensus. I think that the general consensus is most of the readers would rather see another piece of fiction than the comics.
Really?
That's the feedback I'm getting.
Okay. All right. Shall we move on to Joe? Joe, an audience member wants to know, what is your favorite King in Yellow story and why?
Mike, you're You're muted also.
Joe, you there? Oh, that's weird. I see Joe, but he's not responding. You guys can hear me now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't
there you
hear
go.
anything for a minute.
All right. There's an
just
edit for the
sitting here.
podcast later. So I got a question from an audience member for you, Joe. What's your favorite King in Yellow story and why? We'll start with that.
Oh yeah, I saw all those things earlier. I actually, well, my favorite by Chambers is of course The Repair of Reputations. I mean, it's, as far as I'm concerned, one of the quintessential unreliable narrator tales. It's a really rich tale, and because the narrator is unreliable, we have a mystery, and I love mysteries. I think it's wonderfully written. I think it stands the test of time. So for Chambers, it's that.
Okay.
Every other King in Yellow story ever written, my favorite is The River a Night's Dreaming by Carl Wagner.
That's a magnificent story.
It's one of the best horror short stories written in the 20th century. Wagner understood Chambers. He didn't pollute it. He stuck with Chambers. It's an absolutely marvelous tale. I think it's perfect in every way, shape, or form. And that person had also asked my interpretation of True Detective.
Mm-hmm.
I liked True Detective. I liked the way they used the King in Yellow. Enjoyed that season. Enjoyed the usage. They didn't pollute the King in Yellow. And I've been doing King in Yellow work for over a decade that was in a similar vein. So yeah, I liked it a lot. Other than the fact is, by the beginning of the second episode, I knew what was coming. So it was one of those things where, oh right, it's that, and then was hoping I was wrong. So, but that happens occasionally. You start watching a film and you know what the end is,
Yeah.
And I just saw that coming a mile away. So,
Well, later in that same thread, Chris Carroll asks, what are some of your non-genre literary influences?
Okay. I'm a Marvel Comics kid in the 60s. So one of my primary influences is Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby's storytelling, his art is brilliant, but Jack Kirby's storytelling I find to be utterly brilliant. I love the way he uses the page and what he produces on a page. So his manner of storytelling, I never intended to write. So these are things that just as a reader, as a fan, I guess creeped in, and when I began to write, they were there and made themselves evident. So Kirby, next would be Poe and Block as literary influences, because I'm really interested in, with them it's murderers and killers. Block with Jack the Ripper and Norman Bates long before I knew of Lovecraft. I just adored Block. Certainly poetry, postmodern, hybrid. I could go on for an hour about poetry. Music, I could go on. Crime fiction is huge. I got my paws on The Arm by Clark Howard when I was 12. I had no idea that fiction like that existed. It's a hard-boiled thing. It was one of the I liked it a lot. It's God to me. There's a musician called Jacques Brel. Anybody who's read a lot of my stuff and knows Jacques Brel's music well. Brel is a huge influence in an odd way. Noir film. Another thing that influences me is lists. I've kept lists my whole life. I'm fascinated by lists, like lists. Masks. Perhaps that goes back to superheroes. I'm sure it does.
Joe, I got a question from
big
me.
influences.
Sorry.
Freeform radio in the 60s, because you could go from Ravi Shankar to the Doors to a class. There were no rules. You never knew what was coming next. Things go together. Michael Sisko, huge influence when I started writing. I got to hang out with Sisko early on, and he just showed me, you know, there were no limits. And the other thing I'm fascinated by is names. Place names, people names. So, but, you know, that's a jumble of, that's a list of what my various influences are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm personally curious, at what point did you say to yourself, yeah, writer, editor, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to be?
At what point, what?
At what point did you know that you wanted to be a writer and an editor? When did that happen?
I was a reader. At one point in the mid-90s, we got our first computer. Never used one. One went bad winter. I just sat there and I started typing for the hell of it, because I never used the word processor. I wound up writing Nightmare's Disciple. That was the very first thing I ever wrote. I heard about the Necronomicon. I went to the Necronomicon. I tracked down Bob Price. I said, I wrote this stupid novel. I have no idea what it is, if it has any merits. Would you read it? He loved it. It got published. And suddenly I was writing. He was editing Crypt at the time. He wanted stories. I didn't have any stories, so I started writing stories. So it just, I fell into it by accident. The editing, I watched Bob edit, you know, and I had ideas. And at one point at one point Bob was going to stop editing Crypt, and he gave it to Sisko and I to edit. And we actually edited an issue and turned it in, but the publisher up and left the planet. So I had all these ideas for books, and I would say to Bob, you should do this book for an anthology, or ST. I recommended a couple of things. And one of the first things I was pitching to both of them was a season in Carcosa or something like that. And they both told me, you're the Chambers guy, you should edit the book. Of course, I didn't know how, and then it's like, okay, who would I invite? And I invited people, and we put that out, and I just kept going. But not something I planned to do writing, and I sure didn't plan to edit. I was strictly a reader who, oh, I'd like to see this. Oh, I'd like to read that by this guy, or you know,
Right.
and I fell in, and you know, I continue to swim here.
Yeah, you know, Ellen Datlow told me once that editing is something you learn as you do it.
Yeah, I mean, craft-wise, certainly. Um, I seem to have gotten a lot of credibility, respect as an editor um, in general for the anthologies I've edited, which I appreciate a great deal. And award nominations, and the Grim Scribes Puppets actually won a Shirley Jackson Award for Best Anthology, so I was just floored by that. Never saw that coming. It's a lot of fun. It's you know, I don't know how other people do it. I know what works for me. Um, but part of the thrill is here's a theme, people that, you know, and I get an idea, oh, I'll like this one, and this one, and, you know, then they start sending us stuff, you know, and it's John Langan has agreed to be in this book, and you open your email one day, and there's this brand new story, and you're the first person on the planet, excuse me, to read this new John Langan piece, you know, or Cisco, or Olivia Llewellyn, or whomever. And it's cool as hell. Yeah, that's the thrilling part, is to know that you're kind of you're the taxi driver who drove the person to the hospital so they could have the baby, you know. Well, you know, it's like Olivia Llewellyn was nominated for a Jackson for an award that was in an anthology I edited. Selena Chambers was nominated for a World Fantasy Award for a story of hers that was in Casilda's Song. That's just thrilling to me. I get so excited. You know, it's like that these things that, you know, I sort of helped create got created, and they're being recognized as, you know, that's a thrill to, because I believe it's important that we play it forward. And, you know, so that's my, plus as an advocate, you know, it's like, I've done a lot of Robert Chambers. Well, I've edited 2 Chambers-based King in Yellow anthologies. I'm a Chambers advocate. I want people to know about Chambers, to appreciate Chambers, to appreciate, you know, the King in Yellow. It's my mission to some degree. So, and while we're talking about the King in Yellow, somebody had asked, do I have a favorite quote from the King in Yellow play? And indeed I do. It's Casilda's Song, Act 1, Scene 2. It's mysterious. It's a great gateway drug to me. So that's my favorite little quote from the play.
So what are you working on now, writing and editing? And what's coming next? And what's been recent?
Well, I got a new novel, which is a King in Yellow novel. I'm editing that now. I'm working on at the moment 3 stories, which are all in one way or another Lovecraftian. And let's see, Leaves of a Necronomicon is finally on the shelf, back on the shelf to get released this year. So I'm working on that. I mean, it's done. It's been done forever, but it's actively being built as a book now.
Yeah, when will that be out this year? Do they have a
fall?
Okay.
I don't have a specific date. I keep being told fall. So, but everything, you know, the table of contents, all the stories, the introduction, everything was turned in many moons ago. So
Okay.
that's coming. Along with Scott Anilowski, I edited a Ramsey Campbell tribute anthology that we realize how many people are into Campbell's Lovecraftian work, but Scott and I wanted to do a tribute that was non-Lovecraftian because of the vast body of Ramsey Campbell's work. So this is a tribute to Campbell. It does contain one Lovecraftian story because that's part of his body of work, but that's like 1 out of 20 stories. All the rest is non-Lovecraftian. That's coming from PS Publishing this year. And there are some other things being worked on, but I can't talk about them at the moment.
Rick, I think you have a question.
You could edit an anthology for an existing character, author tribute, series, and you didn't have to worry about the rights.
Do you want me to tell you about the things that I've worked on that didn't come? There's a whole bunch. There are several things that I worked on and spent a lot of time trying to put together that did not work. Mostly due to the fact is people wanted money. And not a little money for licensing. They wanted money, which publishers didn't have. The one that I would love to do more than any other that I couldn't make work is Carl Wagner. I would just kill to do a tribute anthology to him. He's important to me as a writer, as an editor. I mean, you know, when he was doing the Doll Horror Best Horror Series, that was a big event every year when I found a new one of those. Pre-Ellen, he was probably my favorite editor. In general, of course, there's Charles Grant too.
Wait,
So.
can I ask, before we
heck,
talk
yeah.
about Carl Edward Wagner, what was the stumbling block? Was it the estate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, but yeah. You know, everybody's got opinions. Everybody, sometimes these negotiations start to go well, and then at some point somebody says, "Oh, by the way," and you know, there goes the project out the window. So, you know, but that's one of the biggies I wanted to do. Giger, 1 billion years ago, I started a Giger tribute anthology that was moving along really well, and really excited. But ultimately, something came up, and that just completely fell apart. That was a train wreck. Cisco wrote a great story for that. Jeff Thomas wrote a quintessential story for that. Stephen Chapman wrote a story. There were some really wonderful tales that I had in hand for that book, but somebody got an idea about something and dropped a bomb on us, and that book just completely fell apart. So sometimes it's not easy to put these things together.
All right. Anyone else have questions for Joe?
I have to ask a question. Now, this question comes by way of Salome Jones, and it's a personal sort of question, so you don't have to answer, but she says she's going to watch the show later to find out what you answer. She wants to know, okay, you're living in Germany now. How did you meet Mrs. Beast? And what's the circumstance of how you ended up in Germany, a boy from the East Coast?
Upstate New York kid. Met her online. Over a period of time, things progressed from discussions on art and music, and especially literature. And sometimes boy meets girl. Heart decides to do what heart wants to do, and you wind up living in Berlin.
You said online, was that a Lovecraftian group or just that you, was it a Lovecraft circle online?
No, it was
Because I know she's big into Lovecraft, like we all are.
Yeah. She's much bigger fan HPL than I am. No, it was actually MySpace. She was
MySpace.
Was good friends with Willem. And Willem kept talking about me on MySpace. Joe Pulver, what a great writer, Joe Pulver, da 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 da. So she read some Joe Pulver and was knocked out, and then became my friend or however those things worked on MySpace all those years ago. And can I ask you a question? Sure. Oh, well, in this story, and that was it. The conversation started with Lovecraft and with my work, and at some point I saw she was a big Batman fan. I said, "Oh, that's cool. I like Batman." And she's like, "Oh, I thought you were all Marvel." Well, I'm mostly all Marvel, but So then it got into comic books and music, and like I said, just over this long period of time, it changed into something else. I did see one other question on the eZine board about if any of us have unpublished work that will never see the light of day, and indeed I do. I have two really long works, which may be as much as 400 pages each. I haven't looked at them in a long time. One is called In and Out of Bloom, which is one page or shorter prose poem fragments about a character named Bloom. And the other is called Coyne Siren, which is a spy station little thing I did. Well, it's not short. And it just, here's a female musician I like, and what did I think she would say or whatever on a spy station? And it's like 400 pages of those. They were both just amusements. A lot of work went into them, but Coyne Siren, I can't conceive of it being published for any reason. And the other is very surrealistic, and I don't know. It would take a publisher that wanted to do something very unusual. to do anything with the Bloom material. And you know, isn't a lot of surrealism published these days. So.
All right. Any more questions? Put Joe under the microscope for long enough, I guess. Thanks, Joe. Next week we have, I got to ask him about this because next week is the Super Bowl. But if I got to ask Stephen Graham Jones if he forgot about that when he scheduled the show with me for next week. If he did, then we'll reschedule him. But otherwise, our guest next week is Stephen Graham Jones.
Cool.
And then after that, on February the 12th, it's Ellen Datlow.
Cool, too.
Yeah, we have some great guests coming up. On March the 12th, Rick and I talked about this, and we actually have scheduled a Doctor Who episode. Yep, I'll get the prizes. Thank you, Matt. We'll talk about Lovecraftian influences in Doctor Who and kind of go from there. I'm kind of a Doctor Who geek, but nowhere near as knowledgeable as Rick, of course. So we got some great guests coming up. Prizes. Matt, both prizes, again, The Lure of Devouring Light by Michael Griffin. And the other one was
Black January
by Douglas Wynn. So if you would like to be put in the running for either one of those books, just email Lovecraft eZine submission. That's not submissions. Let me start over. Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com. Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com. And in the subject of the email, put either the man, I'm blanking on the titles again. Black January, or what was the other one?
The Lure of Devouring Light.
Lure of Devouring Light. Sorry, it's been a long day. Put that in the subject line. Put whatever you'd like in the body of the email, and I'll randomly pick somebody a week from now to win both of those books. Pick 2 people, excuse me. So, I guess the last thing I'll say is there's a new book out by Aaron J. French, Lovecraftian book. For those of you in the audience who would like to check this out, it's called The Time Eater by Aaron J. French, and looks like it's only $3.95 on Kindle. That's a great price. And it's got some major Lovecraftian themes from what I've heard. So check that out. And guys, it was great talking with you. And thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.